All right, welcome back to Rob Schmitt Tonight. The mindless career bureaucrats who are now running Washington are careening this country back into the Iran nuclear deal. A U.S. official telling Reuters Iran has dropped some of its demands and suggested terms that Biden could be willing to accept. Now, don't think for a second that Iran is capitulating to the United States. That's a very friendly leak designed to make you want to go back into the Iran nuclear deal. And trust us when we say that Iran is going to eat our lunch in this deal just like they did last time. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates reportedly taking steps to restore diplomatic relations with Iran. That's not really good news. Earlier this year, former State Department official Gabriel Noronha estimated Biden's proposed agreement offers Iran access to a whopping $90 billion in foreign exchange reserves. Fred Fleitz, former chief of staff of the National Security Council, frequent guest on this show, telling Newsmax Iran will get $1 trillion in sanction relief by 2030. You can buy a lot of terrorism with that much money. They also won't give up advanced centrifuges. And Fleitz also says Iran rejected language to stop trying to kill Americans. So these are the kinds of deals that we sign under Joe Biden. Another brilliant deal by this president. Just unbelievable. Jared Kushner focused heavily on the Middle East while working under Donald Trump, as we all know. He is the author of the new book called Breaking History. You can get it right now, and it's a pretty good read. Jared, good to have you on. Thank you so much for coming in today. Good to see you. Last week, the Prime Minister of Israel said negotiating, continue to negotiate with Iran is showing weakness in this country. You were directly involved in signing the Abraham Accords, which helped restore peace in the Middle East, did a lot of big things. How disappointing is what we're seeing happening with the re-engaging of the Iran nuclear deal by this country? How disappointing is that?
First of all, it's great to be with you.
Yeah,
thank you for having me here. So I think what we're seeing now is just a return to old policies that failed. I wrote in the book extensively about how President Trump came into Washington as an outsider, tried to bring a fresh approach to everything he did, not only to the domestic policy, but also to the foreign policy. With regards to Iran, he inherited a Middle East that was very dangerous. ISIS had a caliphate the size of Ohio. Syria was in civil war where 500,000 civilians died. And most dangerously, you had Iran was on a pathway to a nuclear weapon, and we'd give them $150 billion in funds. What President Trump did is it took him 3 years to kind of unify the region, start pushing the Gulf Arab countries closer to Israel. Ultimately, that culminated in the Abraham Accords, which was a historic breakthrough. Yeah. Again, for 3 years, all the experts and the same people who are trying to do these deals now were saying it couldn't get done.
Right.
And what you're seeing now is instead of following the Trump plan, which concluded 6 peace deals in the final 6 months of the Trump presidency, they basically stopped pursuing the Abraham Accords, got on their knees, ran over to Iran, and have been begging them for a nuclear deal. And Iran, Trump used to say all the time that Iran has never won a war, but they've never lost a negotiation. And what we've been doing is showing tons of weakness. And the deal terms that I've been hearing about are going to make the region less safe. They're not protecting American interests, and they're unnecessary, too. I mean, all they had to do was say, we're too busy focusing on China and climate change and COVID. We can't deal with you guys. When we left, Iran had seen their oil go down from 2.6 million barrels a day to 100,000 because of the crippling sanctions we put in place. They were out of foreign currency reserves. They were basically in very, very weak shape. And what the administration has done is run over there to bail them out.
Why? I mean, why is it that they can't? Why can't they just give credit where credit's due and admit that this, unusual tactic that you guys used, which was unusual in Washington, actually worked? Why run back and ruin everything? What does that prove?
Maybe if I understood how a lot of these people who are career Washington bureaucrats think, maybe I wouldn't have had so many enemies when I was in government. But I think that we tried to just bring common sense. Again, I was from the private sector. President Trump was a businessman. We were focused on achieving results. And they say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. That's exactly what they've done. But these are the same people who got us into the Iraq war. These are the same people who got us into Afghanistan, the same people who led to ISIS, the instability in Iraq. And so time and time again, it's just they make really boneheaded moves on foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. And we've gone from, if you look at the late 1990s, where America was the undisputed superpower in the world, and this is not a rebuke of Democrats, by the way, this is also a rebuke of Republicans. It's the entire foreign policy establishment that was critical of President Trump, said that if he was elected, he would start World War III, was going crazy when I was put into the job, what I was doing. And then you fast forward 3.5 years later, we have peace in the world, 6 peace deals. China was in a good place. No wars in Russia. and then you put them back in charge, and look what's happening. You've got a war in Russia. China's being provocative in Taiwan. North Korea is firing off missiles again.
It all falls apart.
It's just, I don't understand why they would do it. It makes no sense, and it's really a shame that they're doing it this way.
It's astonishing. You really start to see, after your administration, people really start to see what Washington is. I think that's what you revealed more than anything, is that how this thing doesn't work at all. And that's, at least we've learned that, but we're falling right back into the same trap. Let's talk some about the book here. I pulled some good pieces. I want to throw it up on the screen. There's the book right there from regarding Trump and the debates during his bid for re-election, which we remember just a couple years ago. A quote here: he was frustrated that the media had refused to ask Biden any tough questions or scrutinize his controversial policy positions. He came out swinging hard and put Biden on the ropes when Biden refused to say whether he supported defunding the police. And again, when Trump asked why Biden's son Hunter received tens of millions of dollars from Chinese and Russian sources. Both times, however, debate moderator Chris Wallace cut off the conversation before Trump could land a knockout blow. It was like watching a biased referee unfairly separate boxers in the middle of a round. So you really go after that debate in the book. What was it like to watch that, and how impactful was Wallace in kind of saving Biden in that debate, in your opinion?
So a lot of people had different points of view on whether Trump, did a good job or not a good job, whether he was too aggressive. My read of it, and again, I wasn't involved in the debate prep. The debate prep was led by Chris Christie and Kellyanne. I was off, not involved in those, but I think that with Trump, like a boxer in the ring, he saw the jugular and he went for it. And I think that's why he was doing what he did. And he did have a couple moments where Biden was really stumbling. He was caught in a lie, and then Wallace kind of cut it off. And so I think that was quite frustrating for President Trump. Overall, I think it was unfortunate.
It was. You seem acutely aware in the book of just how out of place you guys were in Washington, about how you didn't fit in. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, how awful is Washington to an outsider administration like this? I mean, did it feel like you were almost like being attacked by some kind of a cancer when you went into that city? That's kind of how it seemed to, I think, a lot of your supporters.
Yeah, so I really try in this book to show people what it was like to be in Washington. And you've seen with Republicans in the past, a lot of the Tea Party guys, they ran as outsiders, they go to Washington, and then to not be attacked by the media or to get invited to the right cocktail parties, they change and they try to go along to get along. And so with Trump, he was always an outsider. He campaigned as an outsider. He won as an outsider, and he governed as an outsider. And I think what we saw very quickly is that, trying to play by their rules wasn't going to work. And so we just said, forget about it. Let's do what we came here to do. And there's really two cross currents in this book. One is the vicious attacks from the deep state, whether it was the Russia investigation or the phony impeachment over Trump trying to investigate corruption in Ukraine, or all the vicious media attacks. But then the other current, I call that the waves, but then under the waves, in the calm water, it was how Trump got all of his policies done. How did he create a booming economy? The wealth gap was shrinking, wages were rising, inflation was low, gas prices were low. I write about the deal we did with King Salman from Saudi Arabia and with Vladimir Putin to negotiate the OPEC plus oil cuts that were able to get us to save our energy industry, which is 11 million jobs here. How Trump developed personal relationships with these world leaders, how they respected him, how they feared him. But again, he didn't adapt to Washington to play by their rules and follow their processes. And he was an existential threat to their power. But a lot of those leaders in Washington were generals with no army. And I think with Trump, I never saw it as like right versus left. I always saw it as a function of outside versus inside. And he was really fighting for the forgotten men and women of this country who the career political class had basically sent their children to wars, had sent their jobs overseas to China and Mexico with these awful trade deals. And Trump saw it, and he stuck to his guns, and I really respect that. And
you guys, again, you expose so much about how it works. You also talk about the border wall in the book, and there were people inside your own administration fighting against it, even people like Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell that weren't in the administration, but even Kirstjen Nielsen. I think you have, John Kelly pushing back on that. I mean, you're supposed to all be on a team, right? It didn't feel like a team, did it, inside the White House?
So the amazing thing about government is that nobody can accomplish anything by themselves. So what it is it's a group of people coming together, agreeing on a common objective, formulating a plan to accomplish that objective, and then all rowing in the same direction in order to accomplish it. And so what you find is when you have people who are either misaligned or have different objectives, things can go haywire. I write about the border wall and how, again, Steve Bannon, John Kelly in the first 2 years didn't get it done for Trump. And so after I got the criminal justice reform bill done, which was a bipartisan legislation we did that brings more job training into our prisons to allow people leaving to have a second chance. It was a big bipartisan win. We had 87 votes in the Senate. President Trump called me in 3 hours later and said, "Congratulations, you're in charge of immigration and building the wall." And I'm saying, oh man, that's not what I came here to do. But I rolled my sleeves up. He was my boss, and I worked on it. And we found about $11 billion under seat cushions. Stephen Miller, Pat Cipollone, Mick Mulvaney, Chad Mizell were all phenomenal. And what we did is we got to work doing it. Mark Morgan, Chad Wolf, absolutely phenomenal in terms of going out there, getting it built. And we built about 450 miles of wall in the last 2 years. And because the wall was so successful, the migratory patterns started changing. We commissioned more wall to then fill it in even more, but we were stopping human trafficking, which led to human slavery in America. The less people who make those routes, a lot of the women are raped or molested along the way. You had, just the other day, 2 children drowned in the Rio Grande, which is very tragic. So Trump's policy was a humanitarian policy, and what he did was common sense. It was supported by the Border Patrol, and something I was very proud that we were able to do. And I think that what the Biden administration has done to reverse those policies on the border has been a absolute humanitarian disaster.
And they ignore all of that collateral damage in order to virtue signal to open border liberals inside their own party, and that's what's amazing, how much misery they can cause.
But I will say, I don't even think that those virtue signalers actually care about the issues. I mean, they were criticizing Trump every day on the border policy, but then when you have children dying and then people coming in and being sold into human slavery, silence.
They don't care. All right, there's a lot more in that, including some really great stories about what it's like to be in the room with Donald Trump and those big things happen when the election happened, in the days after the election. Some great palace intrigue in there as well. Breaking History is the book. Jared, thank you so much for coming on. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.